great to be with you today as we start the Lent season. We've had Ash Wednesday. We're going into the journey with Jesus to the cross. And I want you to think about this first. In the early days of Southwest Airlines, the employees tell a story about CEO Herb Kelleher. It was one of the busiest travel days of the year, if not the busiest. Bags were piling up and flights were stacked. There was chaos among the staff, all the airlines. The airports were packed with people, and there was too much work, too little time. And then Herb showed up at the airport. Talk about bad timing. But he didn't come to give a speech. He didn't come for a press conference. He didn't come to stare down his nose at his overworked employees from a glass-encased lounge high above or any of that. He walked straight to the luggage and started loading it. At first, his employees thought it was a prank or a joke. They've never seen this before. But a few minutes went on, and they discovered that the most important person in the company was doing the lowest work on the ramp. That story was shared among the employees because it really revealed what sort of a leader Herb Kelleher really was. And that attitude became infectious throughout the company. Now, stories like that, they're inspiring, right? And they make you feel good, and you say, wow, look at the humility of this great and powerful man. But at the same time, they're surprising because this isn't what the world says. Worldthink says that important people, they don't kneel. Powerful people don't take luggage and mops and buckets. The worldthink says important people do important things and act important. And what's interesting about today's account as we step into our series that we're going through is that it dwarfs the story of Herb because this is the creator of the universe coming down, kneeling, and washing dirty human creature feet. The amazing love that we see in this series that we're entering into called Jesus Unplugged is the love of a God that empties himself for us. And that flies in the face of a lot of what the world teaches and a lot of what the world projects. In our series that goes through roughly John 13 to 17, Jesus Unplugged isn't about Jesus changing. Jesus Unplugged is all about the main character, Jesus' dialogue and his prayer for his disciples, his prayer for the world to the Father. And so in this series that we're entering into, everything around us becomes quiet, and we're not following Jesus to the crowds or the miracles or to the big highlight events. We're following Jesus and we're listening to him with his disciples from an upper room to a dark garden and engaging with him in conversations that you might not think are highlight reels, but they're places where Jesus is speaking to us, and he's speaking for us to his Father. And today, John sets it up this way, starting in John chapter 13. We heard it just moments ago. Pastor Kevin read it for our gospel reading today. John 13:3 says this: Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God, and that he was returning to God. All right, this is not a throwaway statement at the beginning. It is actually very important to understand as we unpack Jesus washing his disciples' feet. John intentionally puts it at the beginning, and it's going to be something that you have to grasp onto to understand what's about to happen. What this is saying is you should be expecting some divine fireworks or some glory or miracle that's going to happen next. Here Jesus is. He's been given all power from the Father. He's come from heaven. He's returning to heaven. And then, John says just a few verses later, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist? This is the Passover meal. This is the highlight of the Jewish calendar. This is one of the most important meals of the year. And Jesus is sitting with his disciples who have gone ahead to the upper room and prepared a place and gotten the food ready. And Jesus is sitting with them. And as he's sitting with them, he stands up, takes out what is the outer cloak, and then he takes a towel and a basin. He took a towel that normally a servant would take, and he begins to wash his disciples' feet. Why did you have to wash feet before you ate? Well, back then you wore sandals and you walked around in dust and dirt, and in Middle Eastern Oriental culture back then, they didn't eat at raised tables. Like famous pictures show Jesus at the raised table with his disciples around. That's not what it looked like. You ate close to the ground, if not on the ground, and your feet would be in the face of another person. And so, would you want your feet washed before you ate dinner? I think so. But here's the deal, is that they walked into the room and there was no foot washer. Something had to be done because this was necessary to actually just sit down and have a meal. But none of the disciples, who, by the way, this whole time are going to be arguing about who's the greatest, either they didn't think to hire a servant to do this, and certainly none of them wanted to do it. This job of washing feet was the job for the lowest person. It was the job for the least important servant in the household. It was the sort of job that, I don't know if you've ever worked fast food before. I worked McDonald's, flipping burgers in New Ulm, Minnesota. It was the sort of job that you get hired at in a fast food restaurant, and the boss says to you, here's a mop and bucket, kid, go, you're on bathroom duty. That's what sort of job this was, washing feet. But here's the tension, is that everybody in the room starts to grow uncomfortable. You and I look at it, we might think, wow, that's really great. Stories like Herb and like Jesus getting down on his hands and knees and washing. But if you're actually in the room, you'll become uncomfortable just along with the other disciples as well. Because, here's the tension, we often misunderstand greatness. By nature, we admire humility as long as we don't have to practice it. We like recognition. We like looking important. We like it when people see us doing important things. And that same attitude creeps into our spirituality. And even in our spirituality, we lean towards status. It can even creep into our service towards one another in the church. It can creep in when we start to sign up for things or do things, not with an attitude, I'm just doing this because I love Jesus, but maybe we just mention to somebody, or we want somebody to see, or we want pastor to see that we're serving in some way because we're just hardwired this way as humans. We like the recognition. And so, humility, which is what Jesus is showing here, is uncomfortable. And that's why Peter says what he says next in verse 8. You shall never wash my feet. Now, at first that sounds noble and that sounds bold, but really underneath what Peter is saying is, I'm uncomfortable with you doing this, Jesus, because this is beneath you. And if this is beneath you, this is beneath me. You and I spiritually think the same way because often we want to do something for God. It's uncomfortable to have a God that kneels in front of us. We want to say, I need to do something for God, or I need to do something in order for God to love me, or I need to earn God's love, or I know I don't deserve God's love, but I'm going to try to deserve God's love. It's uncomfortable because what that's really saying to God is this: God, I really don't need you to wash me. I don't really need you to help me. It's saying to God that we don't need him to come and to kneel and to wash and to work for us because I'm strong enough. And that's why Jesus' next words, they carry so much weight. He says, unless I wash you, You have no part with me. Suddenly, this isn't just about etiquette any longer. It's about salvation. And Jesus is teaching Peter, and he's teaching you and me something about how God works in our life. He's saying that you need to be washed, and if you're not washed by me, you have no part with me. Pride doesn't just block the washing. Pride blocks grace. And when pride blocks grace, then we begin to understand that Jesus is here not just to be served by us, but he's saying to us all throughout the Bible and throughout these texts that I've come to serve you, and you need to be served. I don't know if any of you parents have had a child help with something kind of important like making a cake. Maybe you have a cake you're making for a party, and you want it to look nice, but you want the kids to have fun making it too, and they start taking the batter. And they say, no, I can do it, and they take the batter and they put it on the cake, and they start spreading it around, and then you're like, okay, all right, nice job, now I'm going to come in and help. And what does the kid say? I don't need your help, I can do this, I got this is going to look great, but actually half the batter is on their face and on their hands. I don't need help, God. Jesus says, you do. You do, brother, you do, sister. You need me to kneel down. And I know that it's uncomfortable for a God who stoops, who kneels. We want a powerful God. We want a Messiah that's strong. We want a glorified God that shows his power, that stands up from the table, takes off his cloak, and shines. Not one that gets down on his knees before us, because our heart issue is pride, and we think to ourselves, I can do this by myself. And Jesus humbly kneels down and says to Peter, no, you need to be washed. This is where John is unfolding this text. And here's the thing about power and about service is that you might think, looking at Jesus, that this is a place of weakness, but actually it's a place of strong grace. Remember verse 3 again? It says, Jesus knew that God, the Father, had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God, and that he was returning to God. So 3 things to keep in mind as Jesus is kneeling down. Number 1, he knows that he has authority. Number 2, he knows where he's coming from, his origin. And number 3, he knows where he's returning to. And so when he stoops down and kneels, it's not from a place of weakness, it's a place of power. It's not from a place that he doesn't have power, but actually he's showing that he fully possesses it. Insecure people, posture. Secure people serve from a place of confidence. And nobody was more perfectly confident in his service than Jesus. And he does it not because he wants to shame Peter and shame the other disciples. Like, look, you should have done this already. He's doing it to reveal their hearts and really to get to something deeper than foot washing. He wants to get them to see that they need to be served, that we need to be served, that we need God in our life, not just for us to glorify him, but actually it starts with him coming down and serving us. And John unfolds this text even more in verse 10. Jesus explains the foot washing. He says, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And this is the picture of the Christian life. Once and for all cleansed, forever on the cross. Daily cleansed. Again and again being reminded of our baptism that we need forgiveness every day. Forever forgiven, daily forgiven. Forever sanctified, glorified, daily sanctified, glorified. A life of confession that daily goes back and says, Jesus, I need to be cleansed again. And all of the sins that you have already taken care of on the cross, I need that forgiveness again today. Jesus says, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet, their whole body is clean. And here's the other thing to keep in mind is that Judas is in the room. At least we can assume that he's in the room. And Judas by this time has already decided to do what? Yeah, betray him. Jesus kneels and washes the feet of a betrayer. Oh, and there's other disciples that are in the room, like Peter, who's going to do what in just a few hours? Deny him. And he washes the feet of all these other disciples in the room that in just a few hours are going to run like cockroaches when the torches arrive. They're going to scatter. And here's the beautiful thing is that he kneels and he washes each and every one of their feet. Which shows us that this foot washing and the bigger picture, grace, is not based on our worthiness, but it's based on God's undeserved love. Now, in closing, the center of everything, we haven't even gotten to this verse, but it's actually the first verse. We went to verse 3, and we understood that Jesus served from a place of power because he came from the Father, who gave him all authority. He was returning to the Father. He knew his origin, his purpose, and his destiny, which enabled him to serve. And then it says in verse 1, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And that verse, that word that says to the end, that word doesn't just mean to the shot clock or to the class bell or to the alarm clock. Like he just loved them and then his time was up for loving them. That's not what that word means. The word means utterly, completely, doing whatever it takes to get the mission done, all the way to the end. And that meant that in this verse, and really setting up this whole series, John 13:1 is saying this, that whenever Jesus says you need to be washed, you need to be cleansed by me, you need me to bow, not bow, you need me to kneel and wash your feet, he's saying that the cross is his throne. And he's saying that the scepter that he holds in this account, that it's the towel. This text isn't teaching us like an example. You look at Jesus. You got to be more like Jesus. It's not teaching us that first. It's first teaching us that Jesus humbled himself for you. And that's the next key point. The gospel here is Jesus humbled himself for you. And because he humbled himself for you, he teaches you that you are now free to teach, to serve others, to kneel before others. John 13:14 and 15 says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Notice the order here, it matters. It's not serve in order that God will love you, but it's because you are cleansed, serve. Service and humility, it's not just a personality trait for some Christians and not others. It's actually the fruit of being washed. A fruit that you can do. Jesus saw something that was undone, something that somebody should do, but wouldn't get noticed for, and he kneeled and he washed feet. It had to be done. Jesus is not teaching us in this text that we literally have to wash our feet as we come in through the doors. And I'm just saying this because I've heard this before too from Christians, is why don't we wash feet? Well, it was necessary back then because you had to wash feet before you sat down at the table. But Jesus says, I'm setting this as an example for you. And he means to serve one another in whatever way is necessary and whatever needs to get done. I've never had my feet washed. I've gotten close, and outside of Kisumu, Africa, we drove an hour into the bush and experienced something close to this, but sat down, it was at nighttime, sat down in the home for pastor's meeting, and the women of the house came out with a bowl and a basin and washed your hands. It was a very beautiful thing. It is necessary, though, because there was no running water. They had to warm the water up. They had to wash hands. And I would say that was a lowly job, but it was an important job, and they were doing it from a place of power, and they were doing it from a place of love. We wear shoes today and socks, so our feet are clean as we walk in, and we don't need to wash feet. But what are the places in our life that we need to serve, that we say, what has to get done? It can mean stacking chairs when nobody's watching. It can mean picking up a piece of garbage around campus or in the hallways when When we see it, even though nobody else is going to see it, it can mean going over to your neighbor's house and helping them take out their trash when they're away or traveling, or maybe they're sick or in a hospital, and you bring them something to eat and nobody else sees it. Kneeling down means being ready to forgive even before they ask. Or maybe it's apologizing first. Or maybe it's texting somebody that you haven't seen in a while and encouraging them. It can look in a lot of different ways. As many people that are in this room, it can look like that, whatever it looks like in your life. But this is the big point. That you have been washed. You have been cleansed. And the way that Jesus loved you utterly, completely, all the way to the end, it happened on the cross. The throne of Jesus is the cross, and his scepter is a towel in this account. At the cross, he kneeled down and he paid for all of our pride that said, no, God, I don't need help. He paid for that ignorance. He paid for the secret sins. He paid for the times that you and I haven't served out of a heart that is empowered by love, a heart that knows where we've been sinners and that where Jesus has brought us is saved, and we want to serve because we're washed and cleansed. He forgives us for all the wrong attitudes, and he brings us to himself so that we can serve, kneel down before anyone, those people that have hurt us or those people that have been good to us, and do it with an attitude that doesn't expect anything in return because that undeserved love is in our heart. The world says, rise up, be strong and important. Jesus says, kneel lower. Because when Jesus kneels, there's forgiveness. When Jesus kneels, there's love. When Jesus kneels, there's salvation. When Jesus loves, there's grace. When Jesus kneels, there's service. So go, with his washing in your heart and his towel in your hand. Amen.